During my discussion, I'm going to cover a few things. Tracy and myself were also part of the group that they put together to look at the functionality of wetlands about the environment. So I will cover some of the report of that particular group that they are going to use in the process of putting the new wetland policy information together. So today I'm going to talk about the definition. I know most of you are aware of the Alberta Land Stewardship Act and the Land Use Framework. That's actually what I was told to look at, how the wetlands are involved in that particular process, and I will be looking at that. I will look at wetland function, especially from the new policy point of view that Alberta Environment is putting together, what we are going to look at in terms of what functions are. But at the same time, I will just look at some of the overlap, especially in terms of the relative wetland function and the various assessment units and how those overlap with the current boundaries of the RDRWA River Watershed Alliance, as well as some of the other W parks in that light. Well, you've had this before in terms of what wetlands are. Different people with different definitions, but there are two things that are common in every situation when you talk about wetland. You are talking about presence of water or saturation of land with water, but also talking about, in all those cases, there must also be plants in there. So whether you look at the Alberta Environment definition of what wetlands are, or the US EPA definition of what wetlands are, in both cases, we are talking about land that is saturated long enough for it to support plants that will grow. I will just quickly go through a few points, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, but also I will talk briefly about the Land Use Framework. The Stewardship Act of 2009, the purposes of this were to provide direction and leadership, especially in identifying the objectives of the province of Alberta. So looking at almost everything here, looking at it not only from the single bottom line economy or money, but also looking at it from the economic, environmental, and social objectives. The social is critical, is very, very important, especially in terms of the human use of water. But also it talks about making a plan for future, how we can manage the activities today so that we continue to provide a useful future for the next generations, for everybody in Alberta, including our Aboriginal people. But also the intent of it was also to provide a coordinated effort in decision making, so that it's not just going to be government, it's going to be people like you, it's going to be Albertans that are going to make the decision concerning the land, the species, the human settlements, and other things. Where do we want what in our environment? The fourth and the final one is also to help us in terms of developing a sustainable system in terms of our policy that we take account the responsibility, look at it from the cumulative human cumulative effect of human endeavors. You are aware of the fact that though you have 11 W parks, there are 7 regions for the land use framework planning. The lower Peace, the upper Peace, the lower Athabasca, the upper Athabasca, North Saskatchewan, which includes Beaver and others, South Saskatchewan and Red Deer. So these are based on the land use framework, these are the planning regions. There are various levels, starting from the regional plannings to those that are municipal plans and then to various other ones. Maybe you've seen this map before, and those are the various land use regional planning, regional plans regions that you have in there. Looking at it from the framework, there are some benefits of wetland, the use of wetlands. First is the hydrological. Wetlands are not just wet areas. In many cases, they serve as areas that recharge the groundwater. But at the same time, a lot of wetlands, especially in central Alberta, they are points of discharge for groundwater, where part of the groundwater comes out and then it provides the moisture for the ground. They also serve for water quality function in terms of improving water quality, as in many of the wetlands, plants will take out a lot of the nutrients that you have in the water and then improve the quality of the water as it passes through the wetland. So the wetland will become more of a treatment wetlands, that therefore the water coming in the wetland may have higher level of nutrients or other water quality parameters when you are looking at them. But what comes out is definitely going to be cleaner. Also, wetlands tend to have to serve flood control purposes. Areas where you have a lot of wetlands, they actually buffer the hydrological movement of water. There are areas where water stays for a longer time before it moves through the landscape. But they also are areas of biodiversity, whether you look at it from the plants or from the animals, birds, and other types of living systems. When you look at the framework, this is just a document that something that I took from the website for the framework. There are responsibility, the provincial responsibility. The provincial government is responsible for the regional plans, and they have all. Whereas the municipal government is responsible for the municipal development plans. I'm not going to mention the municipal government. I was talking with one municipal government the other day, and I asked them, in terms of the land use framework, how does your municipal development plan compare? And he said, there's no comparison, there is no synchrony, they don't sync, there's nothing, they don't actually do anything according to what we have in the framework. Many of the municipalities, and they still are far behind in terms of the planning based on the framework. But then a lot of other plans, including the area structural plans and the land use plans, a lot of those are in private hands. Okay. We've seen the level of authority in terms of regional plan, provincial development plans among municipal, and the area structural plans, both municipal and some of the local landowners. I will just move quickly through this one. It's not really necessary. If you need the material, we'll actually give you the material. You can post it and people can read it. So when you look at the Alberta Land Use Framework, they talk about different guiding principles in developing the framework. And I'm sure many of you have read this, but I will quickly go through those. The intent of the framework was to develop, to be sure that development territorially meet the needs of the present without compromising the future. And I think, to me, sustainability is the biggest and the most important issue when you are looking at the land use framework. The other second one, which is in terms of the accountable and responsible, that in terms of communication, in terms of sharing of information, accountability at different levels of government, both are and the public, both from the provincial, the community, and the municipal. It's also, the intent was to ensure that our land use decisions are mindful of consequences for future generations. We cannot just destroy the land today and thinking that our children will have a good place to live in the future. It's intended to be collaborative, to be transparent, so that people can communicate effectively, both landowners, government, and as well as municipalities. It's also intended to be integrated, not just taking one piece alone, but how everything fits together. Decisions are required to be based on knowledge. For example, Doug was talking about some of the information in terms of the water quality in the various areas. Those are the type of knowledge-based decisions. We just don't make decisions just because they are aesthetic or because they are sexy, but based on the information. So decisions will be made based on information, including knowledge of the traditional groups or the traditional peoples, including the social information that you can collect from communities. I've talked about the fact that it's going to be knowledge-based, but also responsive in terms of quickness to change. It's expected to be fair, equitable, timely, and especially when decisions have to be taken that may influence or affect people. Also, the government says that it's going to be respectful of private property rights in terms of, so that ownership and property ownership will be respected, and also, especially in the role of free markets, and public will have opportunity even to challenge a lot of, if there are issues that need to be challenged. And then the last and the final one is just that they be respectful of the constitutional and protected rights of Aboriginal communities. Quickly, land use planning. I intentionally put this one in there to show when you look at the information from the ARCB and the Alberta Geological Services, looking at land use planning and how wetland fits into that. This is one of the statements that they put in there, that the physical and chemical relationships between wetland, surface water, groundwater are important in understanding the overall hydrogeological cycle. Therefore, it's very important in the ground to even do and have a groundwater inventory program. And they do have that now. Now I'll be going into a little bit more into some of the other things in terms of wetlands and land use. Benefit. It's a sensitive ecological area. We've talked about that before. It's also useful, especially for social and educational and cultural use. A lot of wetlands in different parts, people tend to like to build a house close to where there's water. We can take students in there already, like our facility here at the college. We already have hundreds of groups coming through. People tend to learn. A lot they only use at wetlands. But it also could be a source of water for humans and for economic use. I will quickly, over the next 5 to 10 minutes, go over this particular document, some of the issues related to wetlands there. If you don't have that, if you want it, I will send a link to where you can get it on the internet for you. This was the final document in terms of looking at the wetland value, assessing function. Function determines value. If something has no function, it has no value. So as part of the new policy, the government is looking at a way of putting different wetlands in different areas, putting a function on them, and based on that function, there will be a value put on them. When you look at the function, the definition of the function in that document, it says that the importance of a wetland is looking at the importance of a wetland from ecological and human perspective, from the environment and human. So when you put those together, then we talk about what the function of that place is. So wetland function, what are we looking at in that particular document? I know this is very small, but the reason why they want to look at function is because it provides support to provide regulators with information in planning. It supports the selection, development, and prioritization for management activities, whether mitigation, restoration, what needs to be done. We need to know its function first for any particular wetland. It supports adaptive management loop, including planning, execution of activities, and performance assessment, but also supports the setting of targets. When you want to set these threshold targets, it will depend on the function of that particular wetland. The fact is, no two wetlands are the same. And wetlands in different parts of the regions, they also serve different functions, and they are different. And therefore, we have to recognize that particular fact. Also, it will also help in research and monitoring activity on those sites. Certain wetlands, there are some particular parameters that you need to monitor, which you don't need to monitor on other wetlands. Whether you are looking at the Friend or you're just looking at the Bow wetland in Lower Alberta, in Southern Alberta, they are totally different in terms of what you are looking for. But also, it helps in looking at the cumulative effect management system. But also, we help us understand the contribution of wetland, especially in terms of ecosystem and environment. What the wetland is contributing to the environment. Stewardship, but also consistency in terms of predictability of decisions that we are making on the wetland. So, what the group came up with would be the various functional groups that we'll be looking at in each of the wetlands across the province. One is the biodiversity and the ecological health, and I just put some of the reasons for that one there. The second is in terms of water quality improvement, the function of that particular wetland. The third is in the area of hydrological function, water flow, water retention, flood control, human uses, social use of the water, recreational, educational. This may also include some of the social uses, especially for when we are talking about our First Nations communities, or in different communities, they are using wetlands for a particular function. So it may have a different use in Calgary area, which may be different from Oaks or in other areas or smaller communities. The other thing is in terms of relative abundance. For example, if you find a wetland in northern Alberta, let's say I'm looking at a fen now in northern Alberta, it is very abundant in that particular area. In terms of the concept of abundance, we use this in the relative wetland function. It will help us to support sustainable development and manage risk, okay? But also, it helps in identifying where losses. What we are talking about here is this. The abundance of wetlands today is not the most important thing. What was the historical abundance of wetlands? 50 years ago, where did we have wetlands? Where do we have today? It gives us an idea of where the direction is going and how we can revert that. So when we are looking at abundance, we are looking at historical, we are looking at current, and possibly the projected. Then it's going to help us to determine how to manage the wetland effectively. This will help us in identifying areas that can be restored, prioritize conservation efforts and restorative activities, but also it provides consideration of the landscape in terms of context of wetland management. We're talking about a feedback mechanism, and then it emphasizes the capture the greater importance of that's placed on the scarcity of natural resources. So, what I want to do here is, I've talked about abundance, biological health, hydrology, water quality, human use. All of you are aware of this particular map, looking at different water basins in the province. The reason I put this map up again, you've seen it, is when you look at the functional unit that is being created based on that particular document, within each of those particular, this is the bigger one, just more or less showing the basins. You will see, and then you now have the W parks in terms of the regions for each of the W parks. You see where the Red Deer River Watershed Alliance is. There is within the watershed, for example, Red Deer Watershed Alliance, there is now, based on the recommendation of that document, the definition of an assessment unit, areas that will be looked at as one. The relative wetland function assessment unit, the intent is that it's going to be environmentally relevant. It makes sense. For example, when you look at the Red Deer, actually of all the watershed, the Red Deer River watershed actually seems to be more homogeneous than many of the other ones. And you will see that later. And it has to be sensitive to the surrounding landscape for each of the areas. It is designed to be scalable in time or space, as well as to be capable of administering it effectively. When you showed a map the other time, you can actually, on the Red Deer River watershed area, actually see some similarities when you crop that one out to what each of the wetland assessment unit is going to be. And that it aligns with our other land and resource management initiatives. The document identifies this, and you see how numerous they are. Areas, each of those areas they are different units. Each of those unit areas with the same color, they may have similar characteristics, but they fit the parameters that has been set in there. So when you look at areas that are for Red Deer, the watershed, I just want to say. Anyway, you can almost create the boundary of where this watershed is, where you have the purple, green, and then the dark green following one another there. When you are looking at the watershed management plan, and if we have to look at it in terms of how they look, along with the land use plan, I see a lot of overlaps, especially in terms of the, because both of them, especially when you look at it from wetlands, when you look at it from the topography, when you look at it from the geology of the area, there is a need in both plans to have inventories of wetlands. What wetland you have, what quantity, what type of wetlands, where are they, how many land area, all those are important. There is also need in both the WMP as well as LUP for mitigation efforts. What are the mitigation efforts? Are we in terms of restoring the wetlands, those that are lost, creating new wetlands, in terms of areas where we can actually even maybe need to construct wetlands, new wetlands. I know, especially when you look at it from the land use planning, when you get to the lower level of planning, landowners will have to play a major role in this. And therefore, it will be very important to get landowners on site to encourage landowners, whichever way it needs to be done, at the local level, at the municipal level, or the provincial level, to encourage landowners to in the mitigation effort. That is going to be the critical point in the success of the land use planning at the local level with the landowners. That is the only way we will be able to be successful. It is necessary, and we need to do that. I also feel that wetlands, core wetlands, must be designated as protected areas in any of the land use plans that we are going to make. Okay, I know government talks about, oh yeah, we can remove these wetlands and put it another place. Every wetland is unique. You cannot recreate the same wetland. And we are losing the wetlands in this country and in this conflict, especially when you look at the historical number. I think especially in southern and central Alberta, in some areas as much as 80% of the wetlands are gone, in other areas bigger than that. We will need to designate those wetlands as protected areas, and government will need to compensate landowners even for those areas, because it means more to us and the children. Once we lose them, in most cases, we are not going to get them back. Thank you very much. I try to stay within 30 minutes.